Okay, so hi everyone, welcome along to our session today on Reading for Pleasure. My name's David McCrory, I'm Education Officer for Literacy and English at Education Scotland. And what myself and the panel kind of hope to deliver today is the story of a really fruitful partnership that extended across sectors and schools and authorities. And I think we would all agree improved our approach to reading for pleasure. The Reading Ambassadors project that we put together focuses on children at transition, but really the same principles could be applied to any age group, as the intervention tries to reposition reading as a social practice rather than something mechanical and performative. So before we begin, I'm joined today by a number of colleagues who work beside me on this project, and I'm just going to ask them now to unmute and say hello. So Bethany, could you just unmute and introduce yourself, please?
Hello, I'm Bethany McDowell. I'm an English teacher at St Aidan's High School in Wishaw, and I worked with David on implementing the Reading Ambassadors programme in the school. Thank you.
Navan?
Hi everyone, thanks for joining us. So I work at the University of Strathclyde, where I'm a lecturer in applied language and literacy education. I also lead on the PGDE English program there.
Thank you. And Angela?
Hi everyone, thank you for coming along and joining us today. I'm Angela Noble, the Literacy and English Coordinator at North Ayrshire.
Thank you. And we're also, at some point today, we'll be joined by some pupils from St Aidan's High School who took part in the initiative in the past couple of years. So really the purpose today is to try and give practical advice on how we went about supporting reluctant readers, and hopefully how you could maybe follow some of the same principles in your own setting. We also wanted to highlight a social practice approach to reading for pleasure and how you would go about adopting that. And finally, just to demonstrate effective collaboration and partnership working, which I think, thanks to the hard work of the people that have joined me today, is a real hallmark of this project. And like everything in this kind of realm, I guess it all starts with a problem. And the problem that we noticed in our setting certainly was that we had a real reduced interest in reading in pupils by the end of S2. They would come in from primary school really keen, really avid readers, but quite often that diminished as time went on through secondary school. And there are different claims on their time, they have different priorities, different interests, but we felt that kind of the diminishing importance of reading for pleasure was a real issue for us, and it certainly went hand in hand with the drop-off in attainment and literacy by the end of S3. So what we felt was that a significant number of pupils in deciles 1 and 2 maybe didn't meet the potential that they displayed at primary. We had lots of anecdotal evidence where maybe primary staff would have conversations with us to ask how someone was getting along, and occasionally we could be surprised and think, no, they were really interested in reading, they were a great reader at primary, why is it dropping off? And what we arrived at was that we felt that, well, when we looked at our offer, we were aware that we supported struggling readers, but we maybe didn't do as much as we could do for reluctant readers. And we wondered, where was our support to improve comprehension? So looking at what was missing from what we offered, we certainly felt that there was something missing in terms of the values that we placed on the home, and so the home practices, the home literacy practices of learners. There weren't really a huge amount of opportunities for conversation, for dialogue that would support comprehension. In terms of personalisation and choice, reading for pleasure maybe wasn't something that genuinely offered that. You would have, pupils could have books, but were they really high interest texts? Were they really books that they had chosen themselves and they were invested in? But I think the biggest thing that was missing for us was impact. And we were, our project was initially designed with Scottish Attainment Challenge in mind, and was designed to close the attainment gap. And we felt that after 3-4 years of kind of throwing the kitchen sink at pupils that we had identified as needing support when they came into secondary, the impact wasn't there. If we had done nothing, they would probably have kind of gone on to arrive at National 4. And even with all the support that we put in place, they had gone on to arrive at National 4. So what we looked for was something different. And what we arrived at really came out of the research that I'm looking at just now. So probably the central aspect of that would be the different perspectives about literacy. And we became aware that we were certainly doing well in terms of supporting the development of cognitive knowledge and skills, but we weren't maybe doing as much as we could have around about learner identity and around about how we increase levels of social capital. And what that kind of led us to was as you see in the bottom left of the screen, The Rights of the Reader by Daniel Paynak, which in some respects was quite a difficult thing for us as teachers to let go of, because we wanted that control. But, you know, for true personalisation and choice, and for pupils really to have ownership of this sort of thing, we had to kind of embrace the fact that in Reading for Pleasure, they had the right to skip, they had the right not to finish the book, they had the right to choose something else. And that, again, difficult for us to let go of, but certainly really necessary if we wanted the project to achieve the aims that we set out, which was to, you know, improve their levels of reading for pleasure. The other kind of key piece of research for me in this was how we improved comprehension. For me, that was all about dialogue. And the central piece of research for this was the Aidan Chambers research, which really kind of framed conversations in the way that you can see there on the screen. We started to ask pupils about what they liked about a text, what their concerns or their puzzles or their confusions were surrounding a text, and what patterns they could spot. And for me, when pupils were able to spot patterns both within the text that they were reading and beyond to other texts that they had read or other computer games, television programmes, any other kind of definition of text, that was when real comprehension was able to take root. So that really kind of sets out the background to this project and kind of where we were and what we did and where we got to. So what I'd like my colleagues to do now is just really to kind of take you through the practical steps involved in implementing it. So I'm going now to pass over to Bethany, who's going to take us through the section on how to go about implementing in school.
Okay, so the first thing we do when we implement this in the school is think about the pupils that we're going to target for it. So as David has mentioned, previous data was showing us that pupils were slipping away from reading for pleasure when they joined us in S1. And then when they get to S3, we start to see a dip in attainment as well. So we were hoping that targeting S1
Bethany, your mic has gone on mute for some reason.
Okay, sorry. Thanks, Angela. So the first thing we do when we are looking to implement this in schools is look at the pupils that we want to target. So David has mentioned that the previous data we were getting was showing us that pupils were beginning to slip away from reading for pleasure when they came to us in S1. So to try and bridge that attainment gap that started to develop in S3, we were looking at targeting pupils in SIMD 1 to 2 or 1 to 3 if, like us, your school's in an area of high deprivation levels, and try and look for pupils that were reading in some capacity already to try and facilitate that interest in reading and encourage them to sustain that throughout their journey through high school, but also for those that had come to us as reluctant readers but were able through the data we got from the primary schools. So there's two ways that we go about finding that information: through transition data and reading surveys. The transition information we got from the primary schools contains SIMD information, as well as information on pupils' literacy levels and, in some instances, YARC information. I look at that, and I also give every S1 pupil, when they come to us, a reading survey, which asks them about their thoughts and feelings about reading, as well as how often they read for pleasure out with school. I combine those two things to identify and highlight pupils that I think would benefit best from the programme. I then gather those pupils and give them an elevator pitch, if you will, about what the programme is going to involve and talk them through what we're going to do. So we will buy them in books, and they will engage in weekly meetings with groups of students from the University of Strathclyde that are studying to become student English teachers, and some of the benefits they might gain from that. Most pupils are really interested in the intervention. It is voluntary. Even those that don't want to take part or think it's maybe not for them all decide to give it a go and end up really enjoying it. Could you move the slide on, please, David? One of the key parts of the programme is the idea of personalisation and choice that comes with it. So at a school level, this means the selection of books for pupils, so they get to choose and select their own books. In pre-COVID times, this would involve a trip to a bookshop where pupils can explore the shelves, read the blurbs, get a feel for what they might want to read, and also engage in conversations with the staff at the bookshop and seek advice, as well as talk to their peers about what they might want to read. In the end, we buy the pupils in a book that they get to keep, they get to start their own library at home, and they also get essential ownership over their own reading choices, which is so important in developing a positive attitude towards reading and in developing enjoyment for their books as well. Could you move the slide on? Thanks. With the introduction of lockdown in the last couple of years, we've had to rethink and reimagine the way that we run this programme. We were faced with quite a few problems. The first one was that we weren't able to run those bookshop trips anymore, which was such a key essential part to the intervention. We also faced a few different logistical reasons with the running of the online meetings between the pupils and the student teachers. All of them were working from home and many had difficulty in access to technology. Some of the solutions that we put in place for that, for the bookshop trips, pupils were encouraged to look online for books, use bookshop websites, but also to download the Bookzilla app, where they are able to, that's an app that's been designed by the Scottish Book Trust, and it's designed to encourage pupils to read for pleasure. So they can put in things that they're interested in, topics or even previous books they've read, and the app will give them recommendations on what they should read next. They can also read blurbs and reviews on the app as well. So it's a really useful tool. It's actually been so useful that it's a method we've continued to use this year with our new cohort of S1 pupils to great success, and they've all found books that they've really enjoyed. Secondly, with the logistical challenges, a team was set up so that the pupils could engage with me and communicate with me during lockdown. All of the meetings and information on Reading Ambassadors were posted on there, as well as all the tasks, so everything was in the one place for the pupils. We were able to run several meetings during lockdown, so pupils and student teachers connected with each other remotely from home through Teams. Sometimes we came up against technological issues there. Pupils would have difficulty with our microphones and things like that, but everyone adapted as we went. Pupils sometimes reverted to using the chat function or just directly posting on the team itself, and we were still able to engage in meaningful conversations. I think that we got lots of benefits from running this programme during lockdown, even more so than the benefits we got from school. It was an essential part of lockdown for myself, but also I think for the pupils and the student teachers. For me and the pupils, it was a chance to get ourselves away from the online lessons, take a breather and have conversations about a topic we were all really enjoying. And for the student teachers, it was a chance to engage with young people at a really uncertain time for them, a time when they didn't know how far placement was going to be, and they were able to engage with young people and have a chat with them about something that everyone really likes. It was really interesting during lockdown to see it go from just a reading intervention to develop reading for pleasure, but also see all the positive aspects it had on everyone's mental health as well. What we're going to do now is have a chat with some of the pupils and get their opinions on Reading Ambassadors. So I'll just turn my camera off just now to get that set up. Okay, so if I go down the line and you want to maybe just introduce yourselves quickly, just your first names.
I'm Liam. I'm Sophie.
I'm Emily.
Ollie.
Okay, so first question I'm going to ask you is, what did you enjoy about Reading Ambassadors and how do you think that you benefited from taking part in it? So we'll start with you, Liam, if you want to give us an answer to that.
Well, I thought it really got me back into reading because when you first go into first year, there's a lot going on and there's homework, and sometimes you just don't have the same motivation and time to be able to read as much because I feel like it dips a little bit. when I went into high school, but then once we started up the reading ambassadors, it really got me much more interested. And once I could talk to people about it, it really made me think, oh, I should read more and talk more about it. And it really motivated me to keep reading.
Excellent. Sophie, what about you?
Mine is quite similar to Liam's. Reading ambassadors gave me the kind of motivation to pick up a book again. When I get into something, I really like talking about it. I usually somehow end up learning quite a lot about it. Never quite know how that happens, but I really like being able to talk about it. And yeah, as I said, gave me the motivation to pick up a book after just not wanting to after a while.
Excellent. Emma?
It got me back into reading after there was so much going on that I never got the chance, and then I picked it up and then I couldn't put a book down again, and it got me back into enjoying all the different stories and the worlds that are inside the book.
Fantastic. Molly?
It gave me the chance to talk to other people that had the exact same interest in what you also had, because it wasn't really obviously fun talking to something that you like to someone else doesn't seem interested. It will leave you quite hard, the fact that they don't seem interested in the thing that you're talking about. So it was really good talking to someone else also reading as much as you did.
Great. What differences did you find between the type of reading that you were doing during this intervention and the reading that you were doing in class? Liam?
Well, I thought it was just a bit more relaxed, and you had more people that were willing to read, because in class not everyone wants to read as much and not everyone is motivated. But with the reading ambassadors, you were everyone with you all really liked books and they all read with you. You could all talk about it together as well. And I just thought in class sometimes you do a lot of questions on them, and you don't get a time to really just sit down and read a book the same as you could in reading ambassadors. It was just really good, and I just felt it didn't slow you down or anything. You could just read as much as you liked. It wasn't read one chapter or anything. It was just, and there wasn't as much disruptions, because people in the class can be a bit disruptive sometimes. So but with reading ambassadors, like I said, everyone was really interested and really wanted to do it. So that was really good.
Okay, Sophie, what about you? Did you think there was any differences between the types of reading you were doing before and what you did during the intervention?
The reading in class, as Liam said, was a bit more distracting in a way, but I don't know what it is, but sometimes I work better when there's noise and other times I don't. But with the reading in class, it was more difficult because you had a restriction. You could only read up to this page. Last year, for example, we were reading Caroline, and I'd finished the book about a week before we were meant to. So it was just difficult. Well, most people didn't want to get into it and read, so they were just talking through it all. You could rarely hear it if you were supposed to listen to someone reading. It was just difficult to do all round, but when you're allowed to read on your own and then able to talk about it, again, it's your own interest. You've picked it up yourself as something you like, and then you can, again, no restrictions, so you can just read until you don't want to.
Good. How has taking part in this programme helped you have better conversations at home around texts or about texts? Emma, what do you think?
Well, me and my dad bonded over it because my dad's always been a big reader, and then the ones that I were reading was the crime ones, which he was really fond about. So then we could have all the discussions about that, and it gave me something to talk about with my dad.
Okay, Molly, what about you?
I've managed to gained up more courage to ask Mum to order me some books. Probably ask for my CDs that I've started to read or not, and when I'm really looking for the books, she'll see another one that she'll think I'd like. She'll ask me about
Not sure what's causing that. Right, okay. What benefits did you find from taking part in the meetings during lockdown, Emma?
Well, it got me a break away from all the schoolwork if that was getting too much at one point. I knew I had that to look forward to during the day, and it was good to just talk to someone you didn't know, but they understood your enthusiasm for reading.
Okay. If we've got any time, I'll maybe open it up to our panel and see if they have any questions for the pupils. No, okay.
David, you're on mute.
Could I ask a quick question to the group, if that's all right?
Yeah, of course, Angela.
Yeah, really, I just wanted to ask how it has impacted on what you've gone on to read next, or has it made an impact on how you choose your books?
Would anyone like to? Emma?
One of the ladies gave me a fantasy book to read. So as soon as I read that, I couldn't put fantasy books down or like any thriller or like crime books down, and it's got me into loads of different variations of both of them.
Excellent. Anyone else? Sophie?
I'm reading a different book now from what I was reading in the Reading Ambassadors, because the book I was reading just didn't click for me. I didn't really like it much and it wasn't engaging for me. But so that showed me that I didn't really like that kind of genre. So now I'm reading a kind of thriller-esque book and I'm quite enjoying that.
Great. Molly, what about you?
During the Reading Ambassadors, I was reading like the first book of the Noughts and Crosses series, which is normally not the genre of book I'd normally choose. Because whenever I go on to read a book, I always pick fantasy or some books in that like
Genre?
area, yeah. And it's always been like fantasy books, whatever I find the most interesting. But like with like Reading Ambassadors, I just heard like everyone on like the computer like saying about like oh, Noughts and Crosses is a good book. So then I just thought like, why not read it? So
Great. And did you enjoy it?
yeah.
Brilliant. Do we have any more questions from the panel?
Thank you for answering that.
Okay, we'll wrap up just now then, and I'll pass over to Navan.
All right, thank you very much, and thanks for kids for like brilliant, like insightful responses. I think that that helps to demonstrate the kinds of benefits that we see in this kind of program. So lots of questions coming through in the chat, but I'll talk a little bit about how the university and so the PGDE English program sits within this. So let me begin with the story of how this collaboration found its place within the PGDE English teacher education program. In a conversation with David McCrory and Prof. Sue Ellis, the idea for integrating a school-based literacy program with the ITE program emerged. For the PGDE English program, we've worked hard to build our provision and practices by drawing on the fields of multiliteracies, critical literacies, culturally sustainable pedagogies, and now also multimodalities. This means that doing teacher education as well as language, literacy, and literary education in ways that take seriously how young people make meaning from a broad range of texts in and out of the school space. The Reading Ambassadors project was therefore placed formally into the PGDE English program as a knowledge exchange activity with the means to break the boundaries between school placement and on-campus learning. Here we have come to see how knowledge about reading and what counts as reading has been exchanged between teachers, teacher educators, pupils, student teachers, and now also government leads, hopefully in more equitable ways. And this is to say that we're all learning from each other, and a lot of this is displacing some of the assumptions we have about what counts as literacy, how to set up cultures of reading, and ways of engaging with reading, with different partners. Can we skip to the next slide, please? All right, so that learning is thus related to four main and interconnected functions that we think anchor the Reading Ambassadors project for us. So firstly, the partnership helps to deepen the connection between schools and universities. As an enhanced partnership program, we hope that teachers might have more say into what teacher education might look like, that pupils will influence the content and practices of both teacher educators and student teachers as we learn more about their needs. For example, just as much as our student teachers are recommending books and picking up on those conversations, we're also thinking deeply about what kinds of books to encourage our students to read, for us to read, how we use them in the program, to think about curriculum design. And so we're getting a lot from our conversations with young people. So we're learning more about the needs, experiences, and aspirations of those young people. And finally, that teacher educators can become a direct link to further professional development discussions. Secondly, as student teachers work toward engaging with their placement requirements, which are often situated later in the academic year, we hope that these particular interactions through Reading Ambassadors with teachers and pupils actually starts to humanize the process of professional learning in ways that connect national literacy standards, identity, and lived experience. So as a means, so rather than student teachers kind of being dropped into the deep end during their first placement, they actually have a sense of ways of speaking with and learning from young people before that. So in many ways, this, I think, helps to humanize pupils in the eyes of student teachers in a program where learners are often only engaged with during placement, and pupils themselves sometimes take the lead in these conversations, therefore displacing traditional teacher-learner power relationships. Thirdly, becoming a teacher of English language, literacy, and literature requires better understanding how we notice, value, use, and engage with the various literacy practices of our pupils. In this sense, these sessions allow us to consider how both the in and out of school literacy practices of pupils, as well as our own practices, helps us understand what literacy is and how it might best be done. And finally, we see how both student teachers and pupils use these conversations to open up spaces for a broader range of texts, genres, and interests. In some instances, pupils have begun to lead these conversations by bringing in interesting texts, and sometimes unexpected texts. On one hand, this allows us to perhaps disrupt our assumptions about what we think pupils actually enjoy reading, and therefore what they actually want access to. While on the other hand, it allows us to consider how we might use this kind of information and insight to also give pupils access to text and ideas that they might not otherwise confront. And then if we look at the next slide, please. All right, so last year during the pandemic, a lot of the work was done online. A lot of it continues to be done online. And so we started to share some of the ideas and conversations and experiences and book recommendations on Twitter. And it started to show us that what helps us set this project apart from others lies in the ways in which schools and student teachers have been able to engage with each other, each taking a certain amount of pleasure in selecting books and other texts, in talking about them, in sharing ideas, in promoting their own reading, and in empowering a variety of people to take up space, including online space. The Twitter feeds here help to exemplify the reach that these conversations have had, as well as the interest that this project has elicited from a broad range of people and educational stakeholders. Importantly, these are all both pleasurable experiences. So I think the student teachers will also agree that we had fun speaking to young people and getting involved. But it was also experiences or interactions that demonstrate critical moves in rethinking literacy education in relation to identity, power, and context, and helped us speak directly to the kinds of interests and identities that these young people occupy. Right, thank you.
Thank you, Navin. We're having a technical hitch. David's mic won't come unmuted, so he's temporarily just going to stop sharing and try again to come back on. So if you bear with us, thank you. It's maybe not working, so have we gotten back?
Back in the room, I think.
Yeah, you're back.
Second.
Yes, you're back.
Okay. So I'll just zip straight ahead to your section just now, Angela. Thank you.
No problem. How to follow that, especially the students speaking, that's testament to how successful this programme has been. And we've spoken in depth about the educational and the social benefits of the reading ambassadors. I'm a great believer in taking literacy off the page and into the community, because I feel that once you bring it back into the classroom, you get far more purposeful learning from the pupils and for the pupils. And that's exactly what happened for me. How I became involved: I had attended a critical literacy meeting at the National Literacy Network where Navin was speaking. I found it very inclusive and very forward thinking. The last slide you saw, the rabbit warren, that is Twitter. I started stalking Navin on Twitter and realised that he was doing something with this school called St Aidan's in North Lanarkshire. So I thought, well, why not North Ayrshire? So I got in touch. I was duly invited along to one of the sessions, and I saw how empowered the pupils were. And I now have 5 out of 10 of our secondary schools involved in the programme this year. We also branched out a bit in that we invited, because we were running out of students, so as not to be greedy, we invited UWS to be involved in the programme, and we also applied for funding through the Scottish Library funds, because a natural step for me was to include my library staff and really enforce that partnership. Especially at Largs Academy, it was a really new campus. The pupils were using the library to create their own space, choose their own books, and have digital library at their fingertips. And that's really what the SLF funding enabled us to do. So could I move on to next slide, please, David? Thank you. So it's really the pupils who are at the heart of this, the pupils and their families, and each school will put their individual stamp on it. It's quite an organic process. When I first sat in on a group of 3 S1 boys from St Aidan's with 3 students, I was really amazed at how the students could hardly get a word in edgeways. The boys totally led the conversation, from books they had read to books they wanted to read. But the bit that really hit home for me was one wee lad said, my favourite bit about it is you get to pick your own book. When a teacher asks me to read a book, I listen to a bit of the audio so I know enough to join in a conversation, but I don't actually read the book. So it's that whole personalisation and choice. And it ties in very nicely with the theme of today, renew, refresh and reimagine. These youngsters you see here are from Auchenharvey Academy, and they wanted to take their reading into a reading picnic. So when the sun shone, reluctant readers no more, out they went and had a lot of fun with their nose in a book. Next slide, please, David. Likewise, you'll see at Largs campus here, we have the supposed reluctant readers who are leading the reading and encouraging others to read by touting their own books at a what are we reading, similar to a book fair, but more about encouraging different genres and just sharing the love and sharing the passion of reading. So quite a big step forward. Next slide, please, David. So we have gone across schools and we're joining up with more tertiary education. Not only are these pupils meeting other students, but there's that possibility to meet other pupils across authorities. We now have primary colleagues interested in the postgrad and undergrad at Strathclyde. We have primary pupils and teachers who would like to become involved. So the social aspect just got bigger, and it's really a natural progression, and there's such a capacity to expand. Next slide, please, David. Thank you. You'll find on this was spoken about or referred to earlier. So I created a wakelet because the students from UWS and from Strathclyde University created a bank during COVID because we were slightly restricted. They created a bank of videos, and it was really book recommendations for our youngsters. And through this, it's meant that this is a really good springboard for people who want to try this intervention out, or for pupils who are not sure what kind of things they're interested in. I mean, you heard the answer to my question earlier, how much speaking to these young, or a variety of student teachers, has influenced the choices of books that these youngsters would like to read. And the same with the hard work the librarians have put in supporting the youngsters at my side. I would say to you today, please have a go at this, whether you want to start small. You could even team up primary pupils with secondary pupils in your own authority. You could approach your own further education bodies or colleges and universities. The possibilities are endless. Please embrace it, and don't hesitate to get in touch with us if you need any further information. I know David is going to wrap it up with some further ideas, and thank you very much for listening today.
Thanks, Angela. That's great. Hopefully I'm unmuted now, and we're all good. So I'll just kind of wind up here. I think the issues that we faced were typical, I think, across the country. I think that, you know, we were not unique in having a cohort or cohorts of pupils who, you know, kind of fell away from reading as they got older. I think that's something that we all face. But I think this project that we've embarked on, that we've described today, really has gone some way to trying to remedy that. Our next steps really for this project are mainly to continue to promote reading as social practice, because we think that's been the key aspect that's led to change for this. That's what's got pupils reading. It's the idea that we value their choices, that we're interested in the text that they choose, and that we go some way towards improving their home literacy environments too. We will continue to work with PGDE students. I think that's been a fantastic initiative, and we can already see the benefits that have kind of arisen from that. Students now talk about their initial experience with pupils as being about building relationships rather than the teaching aspect of it. And I think that's a real change for them and the feedback that they've given us. This project had originally, and Angela touched on that there a wee second ago, had originally started out with us using senior pupils to work with our S1s. And again, that's something that I would like to return to. I think there's scope there for those pupils to become involved again, and maybe to kind of fill in the blanks when PGDE students are on placement. And I think a real kind of step forward for us would be to explore opportunities for parental engagement and family learning. That framework for discussion from the Eden Chambers research, I think that's really useful, and I think that could really be used as the foundation for dialogue and conversation at home that would support comprehension. So thank you very much for coming along this afternoon and for bearing with us through the minor, I would say, technical gremlins, but we got there in the end. If anyone wants to get in touch, if anyone has any questions, we have a couple of minutes left. If there are any questions in the chat, then please feel free. But failing that, myself, Beth, Angela and Nav all have our contact details here. So thanks again and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you, everyone.
Cool. Thank you, everyone. Like David said, if there's any interest, then please do be in touch.
Yeah, thanks very much for listening from me and the pupils at St Aidan's. Do you want to say thank you, folks?
Thank you.
Well done, pupils. Well done.
We've got a couple minutes. I see that there's a question from Tanya. Did you get pupils asking for ebooks rather than printed copies?
Beth, do you want to take that one?
It hasn't happened previously, but I don't think that that would be an issue. We could get them an ebook quite easily, I think, if some of them needed one or would prefer that. I know a few pupils are really interested in audiobooks, and some of them chose to listen to an audiobook rather than read something. That's fine as well. I think David's always said you need to be really open with the idea of what a text is. Anything goes. And I think we found that from the meetings, they often went on to films and TV and music that linked to the texts, which is really valuable, I think, for them to link texts and books that they've read to other things in their life. So I think an ebook or an audiobook or anything like that would be great.
I think it was the same for the student teachers. The book recommendation videos, for instance, included graphic novels, ebooks, audiobooks, and things like that, which was really interesting. So they kind of played off of each other. There's another question from John. What was the rate of accepting roles in the reluctant readers, that is, adopters versus non-adopters? Again,
Beth, I think you actually touched on this when we had mentioned it yesterday. I'm not sure if you mentioned it in your conversation today. If you want to take this one as well. Because I think you had said that the vast majority of kids that you approached to take part were very keen to do so.
So most of the people that I approached are really keen to take part. See, the idea of them getting a book bought for them and things like that, I think that's really exciting. It's something that they've not necessarily maybe had before. You know, they're so used to taking things out of the library and having to return it, and maybe sometimes getting chased up to return it and things like that. So the idea that this was their book, they got to keep it, and they were going to get to build their own library was really interesting. This year, and I don't necessarily think last year, but this year I've had a couple of people that weren't too sure if it was for them, but I've managed to encourage all of them to give it a go, and they're the first ones there on a Wednesday at the end of the day to come and that's the time we have the meetings to come and get started. Like, they've actually got really into it, and the idea that they've got to choose their own books, something they've never got to do before. They've really enjoyed looking on Bookzilla to find something. So I found that that idea of personalisation and choice really works to hook in the reluctant readers.
Yeah, I think, again, and I think Liam had touched on that yesterday as well when we'd spoken to him, but he was quite keen to point out that probably the adoption rate would be quite high, given that we weren't asking them to do 25 questions in chapter 4 and 6 plot summaries and all the rest of that. I think they liked the fact that we removed the task aspect from it, and that was probably one of the key things in getting people involved, I would say. Okay, so I think that we are about to wrap up there time-wise. We're at 45 minutes and 3 seconds and the link has not been terminated, so I think we will quit while we're ahead. Thank you very much, everyone who stayed back for a chat there. That was great, and guys, I'll catch up with you all soon. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Oh, that's the bell.
That's
Good timing.